Good afternoon, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Mon nom est Zachary Archambault. Je suis le directeur adjoint avec la direction des droits de douane et de l'accès au marché des marchandises, Deputy Director of the Tariffs and Goods Market Access Division at Global Affairs Canada, and I'm joined by my colleague Martin Thornell, who's our rules of origin guru. So, hopefully we're not going to bore you too much with all the technical info that we have to share. But bear with us because we are trade policy nerds. So sometimes we like to go down into the depths of it. But I guess that's why we were asked to present to all of you to kind of make sense a little bit of this murky and dark world of tariffs and rules of origin. So if we could go to the next slide, please. In the overview of the presentation. There we go. So we're basically breaking this down into two parts. Martin and I work together on a lot of negotiations, including on Canada-EU matters. And basically, we're two sides of the same coin. I work on tariffs and market access, which I think is a bit more familiar to a lot of you out there who are already trading and exporting. And Martin is the expert on the rules of origin, which are basically the criteria that you need to meet to be able to take advantage of all the market access that my team negotiates on our side of the shop. So basically, I'll be walking you guys through some of the basics, the tariff elimination benefits that we have, TRQs as we call them, tariff rate quotas, and what those are, a very brief overview of some of the rules that we have through the form of our chapter. And then I'm also going to give all of you a very quick tutorial via the slides about the Tariff Finder tool, which is a really cool tool. And then after that, Martin is going to give you an overview of the rules of origin and everything that's contained there. And I'll let Martin maybe give an overview when it's his turn. So next slide, please. So this is probably the element of it that's most of interest to all of you. Basically, one of the main reasons we do FTAs with trading partners is to improve our market access vis-a-vis global competitors. And the main way to do that is to access the market duty-free and to get rid of those tariffs that make our Canadian goods more expensive in whatever domestic market we're in. So in the case of CETA, this was a very ambitious deal, not just by Canadian terms, by pretty much all FTAs. CETA is one of the most ambitious ones. Right off the bat, both parties went to 97% duty-free on all goods, which is a pretty ambitious outcome. And there's some products that are subject to phase-outs, so that the more sensitive goods tend to have their tariffs cut over time. So there's a number of products, mostly in the agricultural realm, but there's a couple of industrial products, and those will be phased out. But the big story is that by January 1st, 2024, which is the full phase-out of the remaining tariffs, 99% of tariff lines between Canada and the European Union will be duty-free. So it's a pretty massive and ambitious trade liberalization project. We've already seen, as the slide says, some pretty huge benefits, and our two-way trade has increased significantly since the entry into force of this agreement back in 2017. And we hope that through events like this, and as traders start to learn a bit more about the CETA and how it can work for their businesses, we'll continue to see the benefits grow. Maybe the last thing I'll say about tariff elimination. Most of our FTAs, we tend to do a full tariff schedule. If you're familiar with FTAs, you'll go and look at the website on Global Affairs Canada. You'll go to a specific initiative, and we have something called a tariff schedule. That's where both parties basically list out all of the commitments that we've taken to either eliminate duties right away or over time. CETA is a bit unique, and the reason I point it out is if any of you are going to go and look into that, we have a negative list for that one, which essentially means that instead of listing every single product and all the tariff treatment that we do, this one we decided to only list the products that are subject to a phase-out or that are excluded from tariff elimination. The reason for that being that, as I mentioned earlier, this was so ambitious and we went duty-free on so many goods right off the bat, it didn't make sense to list all of them with the duty-free code next to the tariff line. So if you do go on our website and want to do a little bit of research on your own to figure out what the tariff is, if you don't see your tariff line for the product that you export, that's a good sign. It means that it's already duty-free. So maybe I'll go to the next slide now. I mentioned tariff rate quotas. These are very specific and maybe a couple of people in the audience will be subject to tariff rate quotas, but essentially for goods that tend to be a little bit more sensitive, parties in FTAs will, rather than provide full tariff elimination on an unlimited amount of products, they only do provide that duty-free access under the FTA for a volume limited, so hence the tariff rate quota. So to get to benefit from the preferential treatment, you're basically volume limited in what you can trade. So as you can see on the slide, there's really only a handful of goods. There are transitional ones. So those are ones that by the time the tariff is phased out, so will the quota. So the transitional quota essentially provides you with duty-free access within the volume up until the point that the tariff is fully eliminated. So it's a way that we can guarantee some preferential access for our traders for things like processed shrimp, cod, and low and medium quality wheat, so that they can start benefiting from the CETA, even though that tariff is continuing to be phased out. The other type of tariff rate quota that we have under the CETA is our permanent ones. So those are ones where the volume associated with those quotas will grow up to a certain point, but then they will no longer grow and it will stay in place permanently under the agreement. And so what that means is that you can ship duty-free within that quota up to the prescribed volume. And once you hit that volume, any shipment that is over the quota volume would be subject to the MFN rates. But I think it's safe to say that most traders who operate in the TRQ world are likely familiar with that. But if you're not, really are all about. Next slide, please. So this I won't spend too much time with, but this is essentially, so we have two sides to the coin on where I negotiate. So you have the tariff commitments, and then you have all the rules that dictate that. And that's in the form of the national treatment and market access. So beyond the preferential tariff treatment, this is what sets out the rules for the preferential treatment that the good will receive once it enters the EU marketplace. So these are pretty foundational concepts in the trade world. The most common, I guess, would be the national treatment, whereby a Canadian good that enters the European market, once it is entered in that and it's either paid the duties it needs to pay or it has gone in duty-free, it'll be treated no differently than a European good on that market, which is obviously crucial to having an equal footing in that market. Obviously, we've covered the elimination of goods. Another common provision that we include is a general obligation to not impose any import or export restrictions. So obviously, if we were to eliminate tariffs, but then the trading partner imposed an import prohibition on that good, we wouldn't be doing a very good job for all of you exporters. And so these are pretty standard provisions that we include in all of our FTAs, and they're found here as well. And then the last one that I included, there are more, but this is just an illustrative list, is the fact that we establish a committee on trading goods. And this is essentially a government-to-government forum where if over the course of the lifetime of an agreement, some of our exporters face difficulties getting into the EU market that we think are a violation of this agreement, we have a forum annually where we can reach out to our European Union counterparts, and essentially we agree on an agenda, and we, on behalf of either exporters or industry associations, will raise some concerns with respect to the implementation or the operation of an FTA. So it's a pretty important tool in kind of the lifespan of these agreements, which allow us to raise any concerns that the trading community have. So that's it for my overview. I do have the walkthrough on tariffs. I just wanted to say that once we're done our overview, we are going rather quickly because in our experience, the real benefit from these things, although we can't see you out there, so there may be 3 of you listening to me, or there may be 1,000, I don't know. But the real benefit to us is getting questions from all of you. And so hopefully we're giving you just a little bit of an overview of what we do with these FTAs and what we try to provide to the trading community. But we are going to try to leave as much time as possible for questions that we receive from you guys to try to make sense of all of this. So I'll move to the next slide on the tariff finder. So I'm not sure how many out there are familiar with this, but it's definitely a tool that we try to plug when we speak to exporters and importers. And it's a really great tool that was developed. It was a collaboration between BDC, EDC, and other groups. The Trade Commissioner Service basically led on this initiative. And it's a really good tool that Martin, myself, and others in our group have fed into. Essentially, this is a one-stop shop for any exporter that wants to get a sense of what treatment their good will have in any of our FTAs. Obviously, we're here today to talk about the Canada-EU CETA, but it's a really powerful tool. It's super intuitive. I'm going to do a very high-level walkthrough with some screen grabs that I've prepared. But I would really encourage everyone that has an interest in exporting to the European Union or to any of our other FTA partners to go and just experiment a little bit with that website. The tool is really cool. Like I said, it's intuitive, and it really gives you a lot of information about the good that you are trying to ship. It gives you tariff codes. It gives you information about the tariff reductions per FTA, and it gives you some very high-level information about the rules of origin as well. Obviously, we always encourage traders to do their due diligence, and this information is basically for illustrative purposes only. It's to start sending you down the right path. But obviously, we always encourage everyone to do their due diligence, and we can talk a little bit about that later. Things you can do to ensure that when you are submitting a good for preferential treatment, that you are doing so with the right paperwork and that you're putting the right justification down. But Martin will talk a little bit about that later. So if we can go to the next slide. Once you've hit that get started on that original slide, it'll take you to a general search feature. Pretty straightforward. You've got, whether you want to do an exporting or whether you're importing. You can pick from, in this case, I clicked exporting, so it already queued up that it would be from Canada to, and you have a drop-down list. I randomly chose Germany as the destination for this. And then the product I chose is even more random. It's toasters, but there's a logic to my madness. My colleague Martin has a very specific example about toasters in his section, so we figured we'd stay on theme with that. So basically, you would populate that search with the type of information that you need. Then you would hit the find. So if we can go to the next slide. That queues up basically, and Martin will talk a little bit about this in his section, but the way that goods are codified for the purposes of customs, which is ultimately the authority that handles your good when it comes and determines what type of tariff treatment it's eligible for. We use something called the Harmonized System, or HS, and that is an internationally agreed upon nomenclature, and it's digits. 6 digits are the harmonized level, and then beyond that, countries will apply other numbers to basically provide specificity around the tariff treatment that any given good is given. And so the next couple of slides are essentially to get down to the specific product that you're actually wanting to export. And so the tool does a really good job of giving you a couple of choices to make sure that, with a generic term like toaster, we're not going to be giving you the tariff treatment for some random industrial toaster, perhaps, that you actually aren't looking to ship, that in fact you're looking for a consumer good toaster. So in this case, you have the option of domestic or other. Obviously, domestic is the one you want to do. So if you click that and say OK and go to the next slide, it gives you a breakdown of the tariff description. And so there you can actually see the specific tariff code that the tool thinks you want more information on. In this case, in fact, it is the right code. You can see there, I got to lean into my screen, 851672, and a bunch of zeros. And so that is the European Union tariff code for toasters. And so if you click on that and then you say select the code and go to the next slide, it brings you to that product page. So this is where you start having all this information that become really useful for you as an exporter if you're not familiar with the tariff treatment. You'll have 2 little tabs, one for tariffs, one for rules of origin. I'll start with the tariff side. So basically, if you select that, there's a couple of explanatory notes that just give you
Zach, they just need to go forward 1 slide, I think. Oh, no, they're there now.
Nope, yep, they're on it. They're on it, Martin. So if you look on the 2 tabs, you've got tariffs and rules of origin. Above it, you have the tariff code and the full HS description from chapter to heading to subheading, all the way down to the granular tariff code. And if you click the tariff tabs, you've got a few general notes. And then if we can go to the next slide, which on a website would be you scrolling down, that's where you have the tariff information. So basically, we have it in 2 charts. In the graph, this is a particular example where the good went from the MFN rate, which is the tariff that the EU applies to all external parties that don't have FTAs. In this case, it's 2.7% MFN. This is an example of one of those many goods I talked about earlier that went straight to duty-free. And so that's why on the graph on the left, it's immediately down on the lower axis because it just went straight to the preferential 0 rate. And on the right-hand side graphic, it shows the potential cuts. In this case, it's 0 right off the bat. But if it was one of the goods that was subject to a phase out, you would have that MFN rate, and then on the graph, you would actually see the slope of the gradual tariff cuts, and you'd have those by every given year. So you would know exactly if you're going into 2021, which we will be in a matter of weeks, you would know exactly what preferential tariff your good would be subject to when you go into the market. Next slide, please. If you were to scroll back up on the website and click the Rule of Origin tab, that's where you'd have a bit of general information. We are working with the Trade Commissioner Service right now to enhance this tool, essentially to try to plug in some product-specific rules that will get you right to the rule that you need to meet, but the system isn't quite ready for that. But in the meantime, it does give you just some general information about what rules of origin are, and the fact that you need to be familiar with those in order to claim preferential treatment. So again, this is just a really high-level overview of Tariff Finder. If you're not familiar with it, I really encourage you to go to it. You can just Google Tariff Finder Canada, or I've put the hyperlink in the slide, so www.tarifffinder.ca. And essentially, it'll give you information on any product that you want to search for. At the search function at the top, I should have said, if you know the specific tariff code that you are interested to trade on, you can put that in the search function, or you can use, just common plain English. So that was a lot, but I really wanted to make sure we had time for my colleague Martin, because I think that is probably the part of the presentation that is maybe less familiar to many of you out there. So I'll pass it to Martin, and then when he's done, I'll circle back with any questions that we've received. And yeah, we'll look forward to hearing what you have to say. So thanks for listening to my bit, and I'll pass it over to Martin.
Thank you, Zach. Yeah, so Zach's given you a really good sense of the benefits that you can get when exporting to the European Union. And I'm going to sort of explain that the hoop that you have to jump through in order to get those benefits, because effectively that's what rules of origin are. It's a requirement that must be fulfilled if you want that preferential treatment. If you don't want to get the lower duties that the agreement provides, or the duty-free treatment that the agreement provides, don't worry about rules of origin. Duty-free treatment is only given to goods that are for which the exporter or producer makes a declaration that the goods are originating, that they meet the rules of origin. And the reason we have rules of origin, not just in the CETA, but in any free trade agreement, is we want to make sure that the benefits of the agreement, duty-free treatment, only go to goods that are made in the partner countries. So, for example, you cannot use the CETA if you import something from the United States and you want to export it to Europe. You can do that, but you can't use CETA, and you can't get duty-free treatment for that good because it's not a Canadian good, it's an American good. And similarly, a European producer cannot import a good from, China or anywhere outside of the EU and export it to Canada and get duty-free treatment. This treatment only applies to goods that are made in Canada or made in the EU, and the rules of origin are the criteria we use for establishing what is made in Canada or what is made in the EU. So we'll go to the next slide. And so the question is, how do you know what rule applies to your good? And Zach's already spoken about the harmonized system. I'll speak a little bit more about it. But so because goods have to be classified for export purposes, and they're classified under the harmonized system, we use the harmonized system for rules of origin. And we write a rule of origin for every good that's classified in the HS, as we often call it. And the HS is organized into 97 chapters, starting with sort of the most basic goods. Live animals are in chapter 1. On the slide, you can see here a few examples of where things are classified. It goes from 1 to 97, as I said, and there's everything can be found there. Sometimes it might be listed in a heading that just says other, but every good that can be traded can be found in the harmonized system. So what the CETA includes is what we call the CETA Protocol on Rules of Origin and Origin Procedures. And within that, there's an annex. It's called the Product-Specific Rules of Origin. And it sort of reads like a telephone book. At the very start of it is the rule of origin for goods that are in Chapter 1, live animals, and it runs through all the way to the end and Chapter 97. So if you know the tariff code for your good or the HS code for your good, then you can find the rule of origin for your good. Now, when it comes to rules of origin, we typically write two kinds of rules of origin. The first kind is a tariff shift rule, and the second one is a value-added rule. And we'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk briefly about tariff shift rules. Tariff shift rules sort of often confuse people, but only for a brief period of time. Once they understand how they work, they are remarkably simple, very simple. Because we rely on HS codes, we write rules of origin that relate to the change from one code to another code. So if you think about it, say wheat is classified in Chapter 10 and flour is classified in Chapter 11. So we'll write a rule of origin. We might write a rule of origin that says, for flour, what must occur is a change from any other chapter, which means if you import wheat from Chapter 10 and transform it into flour in Chapter 11, you've undertaken that tariff shift, the required tariff shift, and that flour would be originating. And sometimes we'll write a rule of origin that doesn't allow you to do that. So every agreement is unique. And so that's why you need to look at the specific rules that apply to your goods, because the fact that you can perhaps meet the NAFTA rule of origin or the CUSMA rule of origin doesn't necessarily mean you meet the EU rule of origin, and vice versa. We have a lot of very restrictive rules in NAFTA and in CUSMA, and the rules in the CETA might be less restrictive and might work better for you. So basically what a tariff shift rule does is it specifies the materials that you can and cannot use if you want your product to be originating. And when I say that, what I really mean is it's not that you can't use those materials, but it specifies if you need certain materials you use to be originating, or if you're permitted to use imported materials to make a good that would be qualified as originating. So we'll go to the next slide. So here's a simple example of a tariff shift rule. It's for mirrors. They're in Chapter 70 and specifically in 7009, heading 7009. And then that heading is further subdivided into subheadings. We have one for rear view mirrors for vehicles, one for unframed mirror, and another one for framed mirrors. So the rule for these in the CETA, if we're talking about, say, a rear view mirror, is a change from any other subheading. So what that rule tells us is I can use materials that are imported into Canada that may be classified anywhere as long as they're not classified in 7009-10. So what that means is if I need to import the actual mirror, the mirrored glass, which is classified in 7009-91, and I use that mirrored glass to make a rear view mirror, then that's permitted under the rule of origin. However, let's say I'm making a framed mirror, which is in 7009-92. What the rule of origin at the bottom of the slide shows is the rule is a change from any other heading. That's more difficult because the unframed mirror is in 7009 and the framed mirror is in 7009. So in that case, if I just import the mirror, put a frame around it, and try to claim it as originating, that's incorrect. That would not be considered an originating mirror. What I would need to do is use mirrored glass that was produced in Canada. And if we're talking about in the context of our so that's an illustration of how tariff shift rules work. So now let's look at quickly at value added. Is an originating. So if your good's worth $10 and you use $4 worth of non-originating materials, your good would still qualify. But if your good's worth $10 and you use $6 or $7 or $8 of non-originating materials to make it, you wouldn't meet that value added requirement. And when you read the rules in CETA, they're quite self-explanatory, and you'll understand how they work in the case of the value added rules. It's pretty straightforward and intuitive, as I say. And if we look quickly at the next slide, this is our famous or not so famous toaster example. So you'll see the rule that's written out at the bottom. And the way we structured the CETA, we always have a tariff shift rule first, but often you might not be able to meet that rule because in this case, if you're making toasters and any of the parts you use are themselves classified as toaster parts, and they're in 85, 60, 90, then you don't meet the tariff shift rule. So you'd have to go to this value rule. And you can see the value rule says that the value of non-originating materials classified in 8516 cannot exceed 50% of the value of the finished toaster. So you can have some parts that you might import from China or from Brazil or wherever and use them to make your toaster. But if the value of those non-originating materials represents more than 50% of the value of the finished toaster, then you don't meet the rule and you don't get the preferential treatment that Zach negotiated for you. Next slide, please. We ran into a challenge when we were negotiating with the European Union. In some cases, they like extremely tough rules and rules that really didn't work for Canada based on the way we make things in Canada. The reality for us is that we're pretty strongly integrated or highly integrated with the United States. We source a lot of materials from there or inputs into our manufactured goods. And under CETA, those are considered non-originating. And so it can be very difficult for us to meet really tough rules of origin. But the EU was not in a mood to budge on certain things. So what we did as sort of a workaround is we created liberal rules for certain goods, some agricultural goods, processed agricultural goods, a few seafood products, and textiles and apparel and automobiles that allow our producers to use relatively high levels of non-originating content and still produce something that's originating. For example, I'll go to an example of that, actually. That's the next slide. We have a lot of these origin quotas, we call them, for apparel, such as a men's shirt. So men's shirts are classified in 6205, and cotton shirts are in 620520. And the regular rule of origin for these, not the origin quota rule, the other rule that's in the main rule, if we call it that, requires that the fabric used to make the shirt must be woven in Canada or the EU. Now, we don't weave a lot of cotton fabric in Canada, and we don't import a lot of cotton fabric from the EU and use it to make men's shirts. What we do is we use perhaps American fabric or Chinese fabric or fabric sourced from elsewhere in the world. So this is an area where the rule didn't really work for a Canadian producer. So what we did is we created a more liberal rule that allows for the use of imported fabric. And the requirement, though, is that the shirt must be cut and sewn in Canada. So under that circumstance, to a quota. Now, fortunately, the quotas that we have with the EU are significantly higher than the volume of trade we're doing. We did get very generous quotas, but so if you're trading in one of these goods and you look at that annex, the product-specific rule of origin annex that I spoke to earlier, and you find that your good doesn't meet that rule of origin, make sure you check the origin quotas, because we might have one of those for you, and that makes it possible for you to still trade with Europe on a preferential basis and get the duty-free treatment that will help make your goods more competitive in that market. I know I've sort of done rapid fire presentation of this, but I thought that would be the best approach, because we really did want to leave a bit of time for conversation with you folks, for whoever is out there. As Zach said, it's a bit unusual to just be presenting to a blank screen, but I hope that was helpful. And if so, I'll turn it back to Zach, because he's going to kind of moderate any questions that we receive, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Freezing.
Okay, I think I have been unmuted, so hopefully you guys can all hear me. So thanks a lot for that, Martin. Yeah, I echo that. I think, we're throwing a lot of technical information at all of you. We recognize that, and this is what Martin and I do from a day-to-day basis, and we appreciate that this is, we might as well be, speaking another language. But hopefully we were able to provide a little bit of high-level overview of what, tariffs and rules of origin can do for you. So we have received a couple of questions, so I may just jump right into those, because I think there's some pretty good ones that will be useful for everyone. So I've got one question here that came from Jared Furlot from Emerson Milling. Is there a tool or a service where I can find out if my product meets the CETA rule of origin before I ship the good? So that is a very good question, Jared. I'll actually ask Martin to answer that one.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks, Jared. That is a good question. We provide for something in all of our FTAs called advance rulings, and because traders want to, know in advance of starting to trade with a partner, they may need to know where their goods classified, because if it's their first time trading, they probably won't know that. And they may want to know help in understanding if their good qualifies as originating. So what they can do is they can send basically a request to the place that they want to export to, in this case, the EU, and say, this is the good that I want to trade. Where is it classified? Or they can send that request and say, this is the good I want to trade. Is it originating? And obviously, if you're asking the second type of question, you'll need to provide information. You'll need to describe the good, and you'll need to provide some information on how it was made. And as I was mentioning earlier, if it's subject to a value-added rule, you'll need to provide them with some information on the value of the non-originating materials used to make the good and the value of the finished good. But they'll take that information, they'll do an assessment, and they'll provide a written response, and they'll say, here's the classification of your good, if that's what you've asked for, and here's our assessment as to whether your good is originating. And what's in the EU context, they call that binding tariff information or binding origin information. And the word binding is quite important here, because if you then start trading with Europe and you're trading the good for which you asked for one of these rulings, it would be in your interest to tell them, oh, and by the way, I have this binding tariff information that I received, and it says my good is originating. And that just sort of expedites their thinking about your product, and because they know that it is originating, and it'll just it'll obviously have no challenge receiving preferential treatment. So we always encourage folks that are looking to trade, especially into a new market under a new FTA, to think about asking for one of these. If you're confident you know where your goods classified, maybe you don't need to ask for tariff information. But if you're confident you meet the rule of origin, you don't need to ask. But if you have any uncertainty, it's a very good practice.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think that was a good question, because I'd say 9 out of 10 questions that we get from companies looking to export, that either the Trade Commissioner Service sends on to us, or if we have direct engagement with companies, 9 times out of 10 we usually end up plugging, getting an advanced ruling. So it's really something we'd encourage everyone to do if they're looking to ship.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, a lot of folk, like, classifying a good, it sounds like it should be really straightforward, but a lot of mistakes get made. I had an inquiry this morning from someone who was looking to export jam, and jam is clearly identified in the harmonized system as being classified in heading 2007. And for some reason, this trader insisted on classifying it in 2008, and it's wrong, subject to a completely different tariff treatment, and subject to a different rule of origin. So it would have caused them all sorts of problems if they were trading on that basis. So we think it's a good idea to get one of these rulings.
Yeah, it's a good idea, not just to protect yourself, but I think, an important thing for everyone to remember is that at the end of the day, you can be really confident about the tariff code that you're shipping on, and whether or not you meet the rule of origin. But at the end of the day, the discretion on how to treat your good at the border depends on the local customs authority. So in this case, the European Union. And so if you have a piece of paper and it's a binding one that says, hey, European customs authority from XYZ European country, say, again, to my Germany example with toasters, like, hey, German customs official, I sought an advanced ruling, and I have this documentation that says you acknowledge that, yes, this is how it's classified, so it's the right code, and this is the rule of origin, and I meet it. Well, you shouldn't have any problems at the border, right? So it can just streamline all future shipments. So
it allows you to plan knowing that you're going to get duty-free treatment.
And it gives comfort to your importer partner in Europe that they're not going to get hit with some surprise duty at the border. All right, I'll move to the next question, Martin. This is one we anticipated, and sure enough, we got a couple. So I might start with the more general one. It has to do with the UK, the United Kingdom, and the fallout from Brexit, and what that means for the Canada-EU CETA. So probably not surprising to folks, Martin and I have also been discussing with the UK for the better part of 3 years to figure out what we do with the Canada-EU CETA. So we were both negotiating the agreement that was announced, I think, what was it, a week and a half ago. The Prime Minister and Prime Minister Johnson from the UK, as well as our respective ministers, announced that we have concluded a continuity agreement. So I'll just read the first question that relates to this, and I can explain a little bit what's going to happen as of January 1st. So the first one is just, and Martin, we'll tag team this first one. After January, this question comes from Brad Lahai, sorry if I'm not mispronouncing, Brad Lahai from Livingston International. I don't know if you know Brad, Martin. You know most auto stakeholders, but after January 1st, will Canadian vehicle exporters who are exporting to the United Kingdom be able to continue to qualify goods under the alternative rules of export? I think that's referring to the origin quota, without having to apply for export permits or obtain quota. So maybe let me just handle like a general part of that, Martin, and then I'll let you speak to the specifics of the origin quota. So for the benefit of everyone, as of January 1st, the United Kingdom will no longer be a party of the CETA. The UK formally left the European Union in January of 2020. I forget the exact date. I think it was the 21st or something like that, maybe the 31st. However, the UK and the European Union agreed to a so-called transition period whereby the European Union would essentially treat the UK as a member of the European Union until the end of this calendar year, December 31st, 2020. And furthermore, all of the European Union's trading partners, like Canada, agreed to extend the benefit that CETA provides to European Union members to the UK. So basically, right now, the UK is treated like a member of the European Union. That will come to an end on midnight of December 31st. They will no longer be a party to the European Union. Therefore, they are no longer a party to this FTA. So what we have been working on for what seems like a long time now has been a way to basically provide continuity to our traders so that they can continue to benefit from the CETA in a new bilateral agreement between just us and the UK. And so that's what was announced about a week and a half ago. If you haven't heard about that, I would encourage you to maybe do a couple of Google searches for Canada-UK Trade Continuity Agreement. There's a lot of information out there right now, and I suspect there'll be even more information as this goes on. But essentially, Canada and the UK have agreed to carry over the benefits of the CETA for the purposes of trade. I'm not going to get into the details of when that will enter into force because these are still early days. But there is a very specific angle to this question, and that relates to the automotive origin quotas and what happens as of Jan 1. So maybe I'll let Martin cover that.
Yeah. I don't know Brad, but I do know Livingston. So thanks for the question, Brad. The whole way we approached this negotiation for a variety of reasons was to effectively replicate CETA. And we replicated CETA almost in its entirety, but there are a couple of exceptions that I'll only speak to as they relate to rules of origin. And one of the exceptions relates to the volumes on the origin quotas. We do have origin quotas in this agreement. They're very generous. However, in the case of the autos quota, the volume has been adjusted. And by that, I mean the volume for the UK. The volume that we can export to the EU, notwithstanding the fact that the UK is leaving the European Union, the volume we have there, 100,000 vehicles, as you may know, that volume is unchanged. So we'll be able to continue to export on that basis. And we have a new volume, which I think I'm not allowed to tell you the exact volume just yet. But let me just say it's a really nice number. And we think it's significantly in excess of the volume of vehicles that we've traded, not just to the UK, but to all of Europe since the CETA came into force. So I'm very confident it's going to accommodate all of our needs into the UK market. And effectively, we've really grown the quota because we had 100,000 for the EU. We still have that. And now we have another nice, quite big number for the UK. And so when you add them together, we've got a lot more access, a lot larger quota for the combined markets.
Thanks, Martin.
Now, sorry, I should you asked how it's going to work, and I wish I could tell you the answer to that, but that's still being consulted upon. The nature of this negotiation was we couldn't actually start consulting, or not me, but our export controls folks couldn't start consulting until the ink was dry on the agreement. And so they have been doing that. And basically what they're talking to companies about is, should we have a permitting system or should we go with a first come, first serve system? I think the government is flexible on this point. So if companies would prefer a permitting system, we have a permit-based system under the CETA for automobiles. We don't have it for all the origin quotas, but we do have it for that one. If the companies would like to replicate that, we will. If they're comfortable because of the volumes involved here that first come, first serve is likely to serve everybody's business needs, we'll have that. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Martin. And I'm mindful of the time. I think we only have about 5 minutes left and we have 2 more questions. So we'll do the other 2 fairly quickly. But I think the main takeaway from that question and the Canada-UK relationship more broadly, and Martin alluded to it, is nothing in the Canada-EU CETA agreement has changed. The integrity of that, whether it be TRQ volumes, tariff elimination, rules of origin quotas, everything in the CETA is as is for the remaining 27 members of the European Union. And we have simply replicated the CETA with a couple of modifications for the Canada-UK relationship. And we are, I guess, hopeful, Martin. I trust that the details of that agreement are going to be made as soon as possible. It's just, we literally just concluded negotiations and we're going through what is called legal scrub, and I won't bore you with that. But long story short, the details of the Canada-UK agreement should probably be out in a matter of, I don't know, overpromise. Let's say in a matter of week. We'll see. Okay, quickly. This question comes from Doug, no company name. I would like to know how Brexit is going to affect doing business with UK as against other EU member states. I think I can take this one, Martin. There's kind of two ways to read that question. One is, as a Canadian exporter, what is Brexit going to mean for me in the UK against my EU competitors? And so the answer to that would be, with this trade continuity agreement we've secured, we're in really good shape because essentially we preserve our duty-free access into the UK market. As of today, the European Union and the UK have not actually secured what their future trading relationship is going to be. And so, what are we, December 3rd, the clock is ticking. There's a very real possibility that January 1st comes and the UK and the EU do not have an agreement in place. And if that happens, goods from the European Union will be subject to MFN rates when going into the UK. So that would mean that until they do have an arrangement in place, Canadian goods will have a pretty significant competitive advantage where MFN rates apply. I guess the other way to kind of interpret that is, what will it mean with the UK as against other, like as compared to doing business with EU members? Well, I think we kind of covered that. If you're shipping to continental Europe, you'll continue to use the CETA and everything's great, hopefully. And if you're always shipping to the UK as a member of the EU, well, we've locked down this trade continuity agreement. And so hopefully it should be the status quo for you as well. So I think either way, we've got a good story to tell on that front. So I hope that answers your question, Doug. And I guess, I got a couple of more. So I will defer to Cindy, Ev, and the team whether I will have time to answer all of these. Okay, let me try and do this one. I don't think this is attributed to anyone, so I will just read it. Sorry, I'm just reading this in real time. I've got one from Desiree Whartonby. Sorry, I'm butchering names. Desiree Whartonby from Lead Smart Inc. Who should we contact for a new technology that doesn't have a tariff code or classification yet? Well, Martin, I'll let you go, but I mean, every product that exists has a tariff code associated with it. So perhaps you're not familiar with the code, but I guarantee you there's a tariff code to cover your good. But Martin, maybe quickly, because we're short on time.
Desiree, I think that was your name. I hope so. I think they're going to give my contact information, Zach's contact information. Contact me, contact Zach. We'll help you with that. I mean, not that I can promise we'll be able to find it, but we'll be able to get you in the real close, if not exactly to your code. And you will have a code. Yeah. No matter how new it is, it might be only in an other category, but we'll find it.
And if you don't have time to reach out to Martin and me, you could try your hand at the Tariff Finder. Like I said, you could put in the word description of your product, and it may at least start putting you down the right path. But I'll move to the next one because we're coming up on our time limit. This comes from Luis Botero from Per Logic. Is there a sort of certificate form or format to formally present as a proof of origin? So again, Martin, I think we had anticipated that question, and we got this one from Luis.
Yeah, we have in the CETA what we call an origin declaration. If you look in the protocol on rules of origin, you'll find the actual text of that declaration. It's basically a phrase that you are required to put on a commercial document that will be accompanying your shipment. It's one sentence basically where you declare the good to be originating. So it's unlike the way the old NAFTA used to work, where we had a specified form called the NAFTA Certificate of Origin. There is no such thing as a EU Certificate of Origin or a CETA Certificate of Origin. There's just this declaration that you put on your commercial paperwork, and that's all that's required.
Great, thanks, Martin. We have one last question, I believe. I'm just checking my email because I'm getting these, and I'm being told I have to finish at 2:05. So I've got all of 2 minutes. So great. Last question, and it'll be an easy one because unfortunately I'm not going to be able to answer it in full, but I can give a tip. So the question reads, we are bringing a food supplement as a powder already in bulk into the EU. Now we would like to bring it in consumer packages of 140 grams, probably under another name. Can we use the same numbers for the tariff? I assume tariff code. So Martin, I'll let you quickly tackle that in a second, but let me finish the question. And when we send it as a consumer good, do we need to register for it with the EU? We have FDA and Health Canada approval. Do we need ESFA approval or another approval from an EU institute? If so, which one? So on the latter half of that, Martin and I are not sanitary and phytosanitary experts. Since it's a food stuff, your best bet would be to check in with the folks at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA. They have all the protocols and guides that you need to export food stuff to other markets, including the European Union. They could tell you if Health Canada is equivalent or if you need to go and get an EU-specific rating. So I would encourage you to, whoever wrote that question, to check with CFIA. And Martin, with respect to, I mean, without more detail, I'm not sure we would know whether it's classified separately for bulk or consumer.
Very quickly, the harmonized system, in some instances, retail packaged things have their own 6-digit classification, and the bulk version has a different 6-digit classification, but that's not always the case. So this is one where use the tariff finder, and if that helps, great. If it doesn't help, call me.
All right, listen, we're up on our time, so whether you're watching or 1,000, I don't know, but thanks. Hopefully this was helpful, and if you have any questions, hopefully there'll be some contact info for you to reach out to us. Martin and I are always happy to oblige, so have a great rest of the day.